to get out really bottom of the barrel stuff. And we're just moving in the wrong direction. Next slide. So this is the most common technique used in the SoCal region. We're not really doing fracking here, even though the thermal company did, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But it's called matrix acidization, and it's essentially the use of hydrochloric and hydrofluoric acid at still a fracturing pressure to basically melt rock. And hydrofluoric acid is probably one of the most toxic, corrosive acids, chemicals out there. And you know, the reason why we do this in California is because our shale layers are not flat like a pancake like they are in North Dakota. Our geology is way more complex than that, and so acidizing has been proven a lot more viable. Yes, Matt?
And SoCal Gas just about 2 months ago used that same chemical to do some well maintenance.
Yes, next slide, I will hit on that.
All right.
So acid maintenance, so this is the distinction. So you have matrix acidization, which is a well stimulation production technique, but then you also have acid maintenance, which companies just say, no, we're just using smaller amounts of acid to clean out the well, to basically melt away debris so that we can get a more steady flow of oil and gas. But the problem is that they're still trucking in thousands of gallons of these chemicals into our communities. This is a picture from South LA, the Jefferson Well site, which is literally over that wall, it's like on that side, is a student housing complex. And literally 2 weeks ago, right after our leak happened, they saw white mist escaping from their facility. And it's just, this stuff does not belong in our communities, and this is what we are dragging up and down Tampa. This is what SoCal Gas has been using. The South Coast Air Quality Management District requires reporting. If you plan to do acid maintenance or fracking or anything like that, they have to report. So we were notified, we did a MailChimp newsletter, so please make sure you sign up to our newsletter so you get notifications. Yes?
Senator Pavley, who asks herself as an environmentalist, had a bill written in her office that permits the oil companies to do fracking
Yes,
without regulation.
I will get to that.
That's SB4.
Yes, I'm going to get to that, and I'm actually going to thank you, and I'm going to...
The fellow who wrote that bill for her is running for her seat next year.
Oh, good to know. So I love the participation, but I'm gonna take questions for the end. Next slide, that might be my next slide. Oh no, okay, so these are the oil fields in LA, and unfortunately it doesn't quite show the valley, but we're up over here. But these are all the oil fields in LA. This is where all of these activities are taking place. This is the Inglewood, Newport fault line. This is, Long Beach area. This is the Puente Hills fault line. And so what you'll notice is that oil fields are going hand in hand with major fault lines in California. That's no surprise, including here in the Aliso Canyon. The Santa Susana fault line is the most volatile in the region. It's capable of a 7.3 or 7.4. And we're fracking right here. Next slide. And then, yes, this again, you saw this picture, but these are the oil fields in Porter Ranch. And like I mentioned, here's some old abandoned wells that are overlapping in the community. Next slide. So the Termo project, you've heard about this already, just wanted to go over it again. They have a proposal for 12 new oil wells in the Aliso Canyon that they want to put up over here. This is the SoCal Gas storage field. This is Termo's existing operations. Next slide. And they have done fracking. In 2011, they self-reported, surprisingly, to Frack Focus, and when I kind of had my first one-on-one with them, they denied it, and I said, how can you deny it? You reported it yourself. And then they said, oh, yes, we did. Yes, we did. And I said, well, is there any chance that you could do this again? And they said, there's a possibility, but it's not likely. That was the first encounter we had with them, and ever since then, they have changed their story. They have said, we promise we won't do any fracking. Next slide. But in reality, what they're asking for is they're asking the county to give them a permit to drill in what's called a sensitive ecological area. So we know the Aliso Canyon, the Santa Susana Mountains here, they're protected open spaces, a large part of it. And so they're trying to get exemptions to be able to drill in this special protected area. That's all the county has to do for them, is give them that permit. Then they can turn around and go to DOGGR, which is the California Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources, and get a permit to frack after they've already gotten the permit from the county. So we have no guarantee, and that's why we asked for an environmental impact report for full transparency and accountability in what they actually plan to do. Next slide. So, California's fracking regulation bill, SB4. We did talk about it. Sue talked about the health study that came as a result of that, but I just wanted to mention that it doesn't include any public health protections, and we're hoping that the health study that came out as a result of that will actually be used to create good public policy. But what it is required is just groundwater monitoring. So that wasn't being done before, and they're working on figuring out how to do that. They're reporting on how much water is used, which they're not actually successful in getting the companies to disclose. So over half of the companies are refusing to turn in their information and their data. Reporting on chemicals used, and notification to homeowners within 1,500 feet. So this is all sort of like new regulatory framework, but we're not regulating for public health. It's really just disclosure. It's all that stuff that we should have known, but the 2005 energy bill prevented us from noting because Dick Cheney got those exemptions, right? So now we have this bill that says we get to know. And so the California Department of Conservation's DOGGR is really falling down on the job. They're completely underfunded. They're colluding with the industry. They're not doing their job. Next slide. So a whole bunch of scandals have happened this year. Recent reports show that nearly 2,500 wells were illegally permitted to dump fracking wastewater into protected underground aquifers in California. Some of these happened in LA County, some of these happened in Orange County, most of them happened in Kern County. And as a result, we've seen high levels of benzene and all other sorts of chemicals permanently poisoning these aquifers when we're in a historic drought, right? The climate's only going to get hotter. We're only going to have less water, right? We need to preserve every single drop we have. And instead of DOGGR actually working with the industry to stop this and shut this down, they are working with the industry to help them get around these loopholes and these permits. And we actually did a civil disobedience action earlier this year where DOGGR and the EPA were talking with the oil industry, like, how can we help you get permits to inject your wastewater since all of this is illegal now? Like, oh, we got caught. And so we did this action where we shut it down for 20 minutes with banners and chanting, and it was a lot of fun. But it's like, we have to be vocal. I mean, this is insane that DOGGR is working with the industry to allow them to do this. Totally unheard of. I mean, it's heard of, but like, wow. And the other thing that's been going on is just like one thing after the other, is they've been permitting, or they've been allowing hundreds of illegal wastewater pits. So in California, instead of injecting it in the ground, because we have so much wastewater, the industry doesn't know what to do with it, and they don't want a situation like Oklahoma where they inject too much and start causing earthquakes. So they've been digging a bunch of pits all over Kern County that are completely unlined, and normally you want to line them so that the liquid doesn't seep into the ground and contaminate groundwater or contaminate crops, which has been happening. So hundreds of these were illegally done, and it's just a huge mess, and nobody knows how they're going to fix this. And the solution is very clear, right? We need to ban fracking, because if you can't deal with the wastewater problem, then you have no business doing this in the first place. Yes. Yes.
So actually here in Aliso Canyon, there are wastewater injection wells, so they are dumping the wastewater in here, right here.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's interesting. I think there are like 2 or 3 or something, but not all of the wastewater is being processed here. And a lot of times what they're doing is they're trucking out wastewater to other communities where it is being dumped, and it's just very bizarre. Next up. And so because we are in this drought, and Kern County is the oil county, but it's also where all of our food is grown. And there's a lot of competition for freshwater resources, especially in this drought. And so a lot of farmers have turned to the oil company and saying, hey, You have all that leftover wastewater. Can we use it to irrigate our crops? And Chevron is literally working with farmers, and Chevron's like the most known kind of big oil company in our state, and they're doing all these propaganda ads all over the 5 right now, but this is just insane, and we really don't know what the long-term impacts of this are. This hasn't been studied, and they're just doing it all over Kern County.
California grown.
And actually, Food and Water Watch helped expose this. If you want to search it, Mother Jones is kind of an independent journal, and they did an expose where we talked about all the different brands that are doing this, a lot of different grapes, wine, nuts, fruits, anything you can kind of think of. So please check that out online. And so the oil industry uses at least 80 billion gallons of fresh water every year. And again, the industry really hasn't been complying with disclosing that, so that's a very conservative, low-balling number. And the oil industry produces 130 billion gallons of toxic wastewater a year. And this is a problem, again, like we just don't know what to do with it. It's too much, and so we end up getting into trouble. Next slide. So why is all of this happening? I mean, bottom line is the oil lobby is the biggest lobby in California, and they're getting away with buying our politicians. Next slide. The biggest lobbying group is the Western States Petroleum Association, and they are kind of like a lobbying firm that works with Chevron and Oxy and Air and all the sort of big names in California. Just in the last year alone, that one group spent $11 million lobbying the state legislature, padding pockets, and buying off politicians. And you can see that that number has been rapidly increasing over time. Why? Because communities are rising up and fighting back, so they're trying to spend more money to defeat us. Jerry Brown, I mean, I could go into all kinds of examples of politicians who are bought off by the industry, but in California, but Jerry Brown's the obvious big one, right? He is touting himself as a climate leader. He's helped pass, sort of groundbreaking climate legislation, but he's totally bought off by the industry. When he first came into office, his first term, the first thing he did, pretty much, was fire the top 2 regulators in Dogger, who were like, wait a second, we see this fracking boom coming into our state, we want to slow down, we don't want to expedite permits, we want to look into this. And the oil industry said, oh no, you're picking on us, it's so unfair, we need to get business done, blah, blah, blah. And so Governor Brown fired them, and in exchange, they donated over $1 million to his Prop 20 campaign, which was which was like the first tax that Californians had voted on in a very long time to fund schools and police and education. And so that was a clear, trade-off. You get rid of the regulators that we don't like, and we'll fund your pet projects. And this is what Governor Brown has done time and time again. I have so many examples. And so the movement to ban fracking, you've heard about it. It's big, it's growing, it's not going away. Next slide. We helped pass a ban in New York. Maryland then this year did a 2-year moratorium on fracking. Vermont banned fracking. Over 470 communities across the United States have stood up and passed resolutions, moratoriums, bans on fracking. And in California, we've seen it in Beverly Hills, Santa Cruz, we're working in Santa Barbara, Ventura, Monterey, Butte County, Oakland, we're working everywhere to spread this message. And so the solutions are not only ban fracking, but we have to think about the positives too. What can we do? And there are 3 things that we can do. We can keep fossil fuels in the ground, so stop fracking, stop pulling it out. We need to get off of fracked natural gas, and we need to go 100% real clean energy as soon as possible. Next slide. So in LA and California, we're hitting some really incredible benchmarks here in the next couple decades. Our state is on track to hit 33% renewable energy by 2020. LA is on that track. We're hitting it easily. It's so easy. I had a kind of interesting moment with DWP last year when they were like, by 2040, we're only going to get to another 40. And I thought, that's kind of a little too late. And then it turns out that Governor Brown agreed, and he was like, you know what, we need to go 50% by 2030. And so he made that declaration, and then SB 350 passed, which was a huge coalition effort. WISPA came out against it in droves. Like, they threw so much money into that campaign, but we still won. We got 50% renewable energy by 2030, which is great. Now LA has to do that because it's state mandated now. So when are we gonna get to 100? The technology is already here. What we lack is the political will. You know, we've seen time and time again that when this country puts its mind to doing something, we get it done. We've put a man on the moon. We've, you know, transformed our factories in World War II to build planes, to build machinery. We can do the same for the Green Revolution here in California, in Los Angeles. We need our political leaders to agree with us. And so I have a petition in the back. Maybe Walker can help me pass that around. It's on my table. But what we just did this last week is we did an action where we called on Mayor Garcetti to set a timeline. Give us a date. When is LA going to go 100% clean energy? Because this is how we get off of natural gas. This is how we clean up our communities, clean up our air, provide good, clean, green jobs. And actually the mayor before him, Mayor Villaraigosa, he committed Los Angeles to getting off of coal, which is a really good thing. Most of our coal is generated out of state, and we bring that energy in on massive transmission lines, which is good. But what we really need to do is get off fracked gas, and because we're getting off of coal, DWP wants to increase its reliance on fracked natural gas. And that's really bad news for Porter Ranch. I mean, the facility we've already talked about is expanding, it's increasing. We're getting into another 40 years with them. We need to rapidly go 100% clean energy to prevent that from happening. So please sign the petition, it is going around. I would love to have you on board. The other thing that's going on, and this is a place where you can get involved, is SoCalGas behind the scenes, and I have a couple of sources, of course they're not public about this, but they are trying to get another 20-year contract with the City of LA and DWP for, you know, a contract for supplying natural gas. And we can't afford to get into more long-term contracts. We need to be flexible. The market is changing, the technology is changing. It's not going to be a linear change, it's going to be a radical, quick change that we don't need our city to be in some long-term contract that prevents us from moving to clean energy when that's what we need to be doing. And so this is kind of hush-hush, they're not really talking about it publicly, but what I would like to do is start organizing lobby visits, talking to our council members to let them know no more long-term contracts, year to year only. So Mitch Englander really needs to hear from you on that one. Next slide. And then Governor Brown, of course, we will keep telling him to ban fracking, be a real climate leader, ban fracking. But in Los Angeles, LA really has an opportunity to lead. And in the next year, starting in January and February, we're going to see the launching of a campaign that was going to stop urban oil drilling. And this means drilling that's happening way too close to people's homes. We're going to be working in a broad coalition of groups that are affected in South LA and across the city to make that happen. And so again, that's something that Mitch Englander will be voting on, and so we will need his support on that. We need to move LA in the right direction. And then finally, we need to stop the terminal project. We can't afford more expansion, more drilling, and Porter Ranch can take the lead on that. And so we need to tell Supervisor Antonovich that to reject the 12 wells. We also need to lobby every single board of supervisor, and we'll be organizing that. And we need to stay involved with the EIR process because public input at that point will be critical in getting the real answers, the real questions asked that will inform the Board of Supervisors on their decision. Next slide. And that's it. So thank you so much. It's been an honor to be working in this community, to speak with all of you, to share some of my radical ideas with you. But I think it's really possible. I think we can envision a future, and Porter Ranch, you guys getting mobilized, you guys getting active is really going to move the city to do all the right energy policies that we need to be acting on. So thank you. All right, so what we're going to do next is open up Q&A. Thank you so much.